Fine, thank you.
Great.
I'm hearing my echo.
Oh,
Yeah, you can hear.
How do you hear my sound?
I hear it well. That
No.
works perfectly well for me.
I was hearing the echo, even my echo.
Yeah, there is echo from Sunil as well. Well, let's see how it will go. I will just start sharply at 3 Brussels time.
Should I rejoin just to ensure that I don't hear the echo maybe?
Your sound is not very good.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
I can hear my echo and maybe even yours. So should I try and rejoin, or is there an issue in the connection itself?
Technically, I don't know how to avoid this echo. You think if I get out and in, it will? I will try that.
Hello? Yeah, I can hear my echo as well. Maybe I'll also rejoin again.
Okay.
So let's see. Echo is still there. Not much you can do. Well, Sunil, we're just waiting for him to get back. He's getting back. You get Sunil, will you lose Senga?
Yeah, he's back.
Yeah. Okay. I can still hear my voice back, but I don't think others will have this issue. Let's hope that.
No Senga? Just waiting for him before starting. Some small problem with the Senga. As you can see, there is a way to get to sort it. Yeah, it's coming in. Yeah, glad to see you again, Senga. Okay, so we are now starting our webinar on water and energy in South Asia, reinforcing international rules so as to preserve the environment. So this webinar was postponed for a week. The reason why was my unavailability. I had an unexpected health problem that prevented me to host it last week. In the meantime, we seem to have lost the member of the European Parliament, Untitled. He just sent a message saying that unexpectedly this week, due to political work, regional elections in Italy, he would not be available. So we will have to do without him. But even without him, we have very, very high level set of speakers. We will start with Josephine Chartier. Josephine Chartier has been working with us as a junior fellow for some months, exclusively for this project. She made a thorough investigation of coal-based power plants developed by China on the whole of the world, and most in particular one that is being developed and seen, that she analyzed thoroughly. She is really opening our vision to something that has been mostly hidden from our eyes. The fact that the present international legal framework does not stop international investment in coal-based power plants. The fact that these power plants have not only a tremendous impact on carbon, but as well on water. And when there is a huge water stress, which is the case of the region in analysis, but it's also, as a whole, the situation in South Asia, it really is dramatic. And so she is opening the debate with her presentation, and we will have then two comments on it to develop. We will have side Sunil Bahia, who is working at the Center for Research Management in Air base in India. He will further discuss the issue of the environmental impact of these power plants from a South Asian point of view. And after this, we will have Senga Sering. Senga Sering is an activist born in Pakistan, occupied Pakistan, that is part of the Indian Jammu and Kashmir, and he is presently in exile in the United States. And he will focus on the issue of carbon upper riparian of the Himalaya and the Push mountain range, most in particular the situation in Pakistan itself. This is a big issue because most of the water sources in the Asian continent comes from this from the Himalaya region, and its mismanagement is perhaps one of the biggest environmental challenges we have been facing. Well, I would just like to tell you that SNCF has been very much engaged on environmental issues since it was created 9 years ago. We think that environment needs to have a comprehensive view, and whenever we try to slice reality and try only to see one aspect of the reality, we are really losing sight of what are the challenges in front of us. We think that we should not look at the environmental impacts in terms only of carbon or climate change. We have to see the whole of the picture to understand it much better and to be able to act as well, because if not, we will be bound to have actions that might be positive from one side, but might be negative from many other sides. Well, This is it, and without further elaboration, I will give now the floor to Josephine. Josephine, she has a PowerPoint presentation, so the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Let's
Thank you,
listen to
Paulo.
you.
I'll just share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint. It should take a second. Share. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So before starting, I'd like to thank SADF for giving me the opportunity to work on such interesting subject, and I'd like to thank the other speakers present here today and our listeners as well. So in the past few months, I've been focusing my research on water issue in Thar Parker caused by the production of new coal-based energy. So what really struck me when I was starting my research was the lack of information regarding water mismanagement and the energy sector. So that's what I'll be talking about today. So for greater ease, I've divided my discussion into 5 different parts that hopefully you can see on your screen as well. So while preparing for the webinar, I thought that giving some context on the China-Pakistan economic corridor was essential. So okay, so what we can see is that for now 30 years, Pakistan has been experiencing some very severe energy crisis due to its lack of local energy production. So power deficit in the country has not stopped to increase since the 1990s, and in 2012, a more than 40% deficit of its national power demand was registered. This represents 8,500 megawatts, which is a huge amount of energy. And I believe that the current energy state of Pakistan plays an important role in the emphasis put on the energy sector under the CPEC. However, the realization of such projects necessitates some consequent funds, which Pakistan do not have. So for that, it relies on the contribution from China. So when we look at the investment breakdown of Chinese contribution, we can see that more than half of it is dedicated to the energy sector. And if we even zoom more, we can see that more than 2/3 of the new added megawatts will originate from coal. Furthermore, if we look at the location of new CPEC energy priority projects, we can see on the map that I've put on the PowerPoint that most of them will be located in the Sindh province, which is the most southeast province of Pakistan, and more particularly in the Thar Parker district, which is in southeast of Sindh. So all of this makes of the Thar Parker district a hub for the production of new coal-based power generation. So throughout my research, I found very little acknowledgement of the relationship between water mismanagement and the energy sector. And I believe that this is due to a planned strategy by the Chinese and Pakistani governments that I call the climate change excuse strategy. And this strategy consists of adopting some green policies rule, both at national and international levels, and putting the blame on the climate change for the depletion of global water resources. When in fact, we know that studies have shown actually that over 70% of investments in coal-fired power plants abroad come from China. So now I'd like to talk a little bit, like in more depth, of how water is used in the process of coal-based energy production. So as you can see on the PowerPoint, the first step in which water is withdrawn and then consumed is through the mining and transportation processes. So especially in the case of Thar Parkar, coal is buried inside layers of water. So in order to retrieve the coal from the soil, the water has to be drained and then stocked in nearby areas such as reservoirs. So you might have heard of the Gorano Reservoir, for example. And the second step in which water is used occurs at the power plant itself through the cooling system and waste management process. So as you can see on the PowerPoint, there are three different types of cooling system. You have one through, wet recirculating, and dry cooling. All these systems do not withdraw and consume the same amount of water. Once through cooling is the most water consuming, whereas dry cooling is the least water consuming system. So this leads to the third point I'd like to talk about, which is some context on the Thar Parkar district. So as you can see on this slide, the demographic trend of the Tharis is very simple. It exponentially grows. So from 359 inhabitants in 1972, it reached more than 1.5 million inhabitants in 2017. Regarding the hydrology of the district, water sources for Tharis are rainfall, represented by the little cloud, and aquifers. In fact, the Indus River is located too far from the Thar Parkar district for the population to benefit from it through irrigation. Yet the issue here is that rainfall in the district is being characterized as deficient and erratic. So this makes of the water stress level this makes of it very high. So as you can see on the map on the right hand side, water stress level is extremely high and superior to 80%. So when we look now at the geology of the district, we see that the Thar soil is filled with lignite coal, and to be more specific, 175 billion tons of lignite coal that are divided into 12 blocks. So for those who are interested, I've also put the composition of lignite coal in the Thar Parkar district. So now that we have all this factual information about the Thar Parkar district, I think we can assert that the production of new coal-based power in the district will have very harmful consequences on water quality. So one of the two main processes responsible for the depletion of water quality is salinization. I've put on the left-hand side of the PowerPoint the causes responsible for the salinization process. So we have the presence of soluble salts in soils, a high water table, low annual rainfall, irrigation, etc. Yet the Thar Parkar district ticks all these checkboxes in terms of causes, and I've put one example on the right-hand side of the PowerPoint. So the WHO recommendations of salinity for water bodies stands at 1,000 ppm, whereas the Thar Parkar salinity level stands at 5,000 ppm, which is 4 times the one recommended by the WHO. The second culprit for the depletion of water quality is pollution. So, pollution of water bodies can occur by two means: acid rain and acid mine drainage. Yet, the air quality in Thalparkar is already quite poor. According to the United States Air Quality Index, it stands at 169, and the principal pollutant being particulate matter 2.5 with 90 milligram per meter cube. This is interesting to know, especially since the SIN standard and the WHO recommendations are much lower. So the final point that I'd like to discuss is in this webinar concerns the health impacts of coal-based power production, both on humans and on the ecosystem. So for humans, numbers leave no part for doubt. Thanks to the brilliant work of the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, we know that the realization of new coal-based power generation over 30 years will cause the death of more than 29,000 people and the increase in certain diseases such as ischemic heart diseases and asthma emergency room visits. Furthermore, some studies have showed that people in nearby areas of coal-fired power plants or coal mines should have 70 times more risk to contract kidney diseases, 64 times more risk to contract chronic lung diseases, and a 30% more risk to have high blood pressure. But this doesn't stop there, because the impact of coal-fired power generation concerns the surrounding ecosystem as well. The Thalparkar district is home to numerous and various species: birds, mammal, amphibian, reptiles, and plants. And some of these species are already endangered ones, such as the right-fronted vulture, the Indian vulture, and the Egyptian vulture that you can see in the background of this slide. So the realization of new coal-based power generation would be responsible for the destruction of these species' habitats, as well as their disappearance on the land. So I'll stop sharing and conclude on that. Let me come back to StreamYard. Yeah, so that's it. So what I'd like to say as a conclusion is that looking back at everything that we've seen in the 15 last minutes, I believe that the implementation of new coal-based power generation in Thor will be disastrous in terms of water management. And therefore, I'd like to highlight how important it is to find some alternative ways of producing energy, such as, for example, solar parks or wind farms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine, for this enlightening lesson you gave to us. It's really an honor to have had such a brilliant and creative mind working for us this time. And I think it is the proof of this, the presentation you just made to us. Just let me point out to this issue of the global warming issue. I have been seeing it for a very long time in a variety of circumstances, but most in particular in the management of water in South Asia. Everyone says that because of climate warming, the sea level is rising. Well, actually, this has not been the case yet. It might happen in the future, but right now, what is happening is that the ground is subsidizing because of the pumping of water, and nobody speaks about it. That's one example. The second one is on the differences that will take place with the Himalayan disappearance or projected disappearance of glaciers? Well, it might create a lot of problems in the future, but none of the issues that the continent is experiencing right now is due to this. It's due to bad water management. And while we will speak about what will happen in 50 years when the glaciers will disappear, we will not speak about what is happening now because of the disasters we are promoting on the ground. This is the main point. We have been struggling in SADF to pass the message. And of course, that the issue of making limits of carbon per country and then just looking on the other side for this massive investment in coal-based power plants that are absolutely enormous in Pakistan and on the rest of the world is completely nonsensical. But I would stop here and I would now give the floor to our distinguished guests from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, Sunil Dahiya. Thank you so much for joining us. It is already late afternoon, beginning of the evening in India. We are very pleased that you could join us. Please.
Thank you. Thanks, Paolo, and thanks, Justin, for a wonderful presentation and obviously giving a description of how Tharpa district looks like and what are the consequences of going ahead with the coal-based power plants in the region. I would like to share my screen as well, and I have a few slides to project. Just a sec. Yeah, can you guys see the?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the recent study which we did for coastal cluster, which is coming up in Tharpa district in Pakistan, and just before that, to give a bit of background, we all know that South Asia is one of the most polluted regions in the world in terms of air pollution. And obviously, the headlines have been made by most Indian cities, but other cities in Pakistan, Bangladesh, are not spared from the health impacts and air pollution. In fact, if you look at national level, today is Pakistan is very highly polluted, and that's posing hazards to the health. And it becomes more important in today's world when we know that COVID-19 has hit us and it's hitting those people who had already compromised respiratory systems much harder than people who live in much cleaner environment. And that's why it becomes even more important for us to look at air pollution as a bigger problem than it already was before 2020. Now, talking a bit about coal-based plants in Pakistan, we know that, as has been mentioned, that most of the coal-based power generation, most of the new power generation in Pakistan has come from coal, and in fact, 95% of it came during the past 10 years. And that's not the end of the story. We also know that there is even more capacity that exists in Pakistan, which is expected to come from coal, and power plants for those capacities are in different stages of development. And we all know that the countries across the globe are moving away from coal, China included. Most of the European countries have been fast moving away from coal. Even South Asian countries have started signaling that the end of coal, at least new coal, has arrived even in South Asia. We have heard about recent announcements by Indonesia and Bangladesh that most of the underdevelopment plants will not go ahead to get the post ecosystem as well as health impacts of those power plants. At that time, when about nine coal-based power plants, totaling a capacity of 3,700 megawatt, is proposed in just one region around Thar region, that raises a big question on whether Pakistan should go ahead with this development or not. These power plants would not only result into CO2 emissions, but will also make this region as a big air pollution hotspot, as well as mercury emission hotspots in South Asia. Now, our study has been done based on data available through EIA reports, and we have looked at the prevailing national environment quality standards in Pakistan, which are anyways as high as 10 times the WHO guidelines. We know that in most of the places, the air quality is in violation of the standards, but no kind of mention has been given to it. And as Josephine mentioned, that most of the data on energy sector, on water resources, as well as air quality, is still not available in public domain, making it hard even for researchers to look at the already existing impacts of air pollution and water pollution or water stress, as well as future impacts. And these are all attempts by systems to keep lesser transparency in data, so that no questions will be raised on these kind of projects, which might seem controversial if people know about the real impacts of those power plants. This is a brief snapshot of methodology we followed for our study. We basically looked at the dispersion model. We used Calprof modeling for the estimation of incremental pollution load at different places. We looked at the population living in the region. We looked at the satellite data as well, and then based on the health exposure or pollutant exposure functions, we arrived at epidemiological study kind of, or we referred to epidemiological studies for arriving at these risk factors, and came out with the impacts of coal-based power generation on people living in the region. This is a graphical representation of area of influence of the pollution which will be released from these different power plants and coal mines, which will be developed in the regions. And as we can see, it's a huge area, and the entire population living in this area will be impacted by the emissions, because the pollutants emitted from the stack will settle down. Some of it will settle down within tens of kilometers of the power plants, and part of it will also, we know that if a pollutant is emitted, basically SO2, NO2, or even PM 2.5, if it's emitted at the stack height of 200 or 275 meters, it travels to hundreds of kilometers. So it is going to impact huge population living around the region. Similarly, not just PM 2.5 and SO2, even mercury. We know that most of the coals in the world contains different traces of mercury, and mercury is a very harmful pollutant, and we know that with the stack, with the combustion of coal, the mercury will also be emitted through the stack, and that will also be deposited into larger regions, which will then ultimately, through the food chain, will enter the human system. And we have known Minmata for a long time, and those are the kind of harmful impacts which will also start appearing in the region if these coal-based power plants go ahead. One of a very burning example of this is Singrauli coal cluster in India, where mercury has been found in hairs, nail, and even in blood samples of people living around the coal cluster regions. Talking about the results of the study, as Josephine mentioned, that we predicted that if all of this future capacity in the Thar region comes online over a lifetime, we know that coal-based power plants, once constructed, is operated for at least 25 to 30 years. And if these power plants are operated for 30 years, it will lead to at least 29,000 deaths because of PM 2.5 and NO2 pollution. And when we say PM 2.5, it also includes the secondary particulate formation from SO2 emissions. Similarly, asthma visits by adults will be about 22,000. Children under 18 will also have asthma emergencies, and they will have to visit the hospitals. That number would be around 17,000. And more importantly, the number which is very less talked about is the work absence days, because not all the people will go to the hospitals. Not all the people will feel as unhealthy over the period of their lives, and they will lead they will be forced to take absence from work. Their work capacity or their performance to work will be reduced, and that work absence days will be equal to more than 20 million sick leave days. And that's a huge loss for a country like Pakistan, which depends on its its growing population for the economic development. And all these people, all the citizens of the country, needs to be as healthy as they can be to be able to contribute significantly to the economic development of the country. And this work absence days will definitely take a toll on that. We also know that most of the health burden in Pakistan, it comes from respiratory diseases, stroke, lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and all of these are a manifestation of, or a result of uh, high pollution levels. So we cannot certainly say that all the people dying of ischemic heart diseases are dying due to high pollution, but pollution plays a bigger role in that, and there are enough of evidences to say that. So most of the health or health burden in Pakistan is caused by diseases which are a resultant or manifestation of diseases by air pollution. The risk of infection is affected by impact of air pollution on immune system as well. We know that each and every part of our body is impacted by air pollution. We have come across various research which says that the simple ability of a children to do simple maths is also compromised if he is living in an air polluted region. And that's just tip of the iceberg. There are other research which suggests that even fetus development, when a child is growing within the womb of the mother, even then it's impacted by high pollution levels. And we have seen that lots of deliveries or lots of new births which are happening are stillbirths as well. And in the last slide, as we mentioned that if these power plants go ahead and being constructed, it will also lead to nearly 30,000 preterm births. Uh, so these were the main findings, and as I mentioned, that the entire country or most of the countries are moving out of coal. They are saying no to new coal, and this map shows those countries. And although South Asian geographies have started reacting very recently, but we have known that one of the or only power plant which was operational in the capital city of India has been closed down a couple of years back, and that was basically due to air pollution hazards. Though it has not been implemented across the country and different regions, but it is an acknowledgement that even South Asia, governments have started acknowledging the impacts of coal-based power plants on human health. And this was the beginning. Now we know that Bangladesh is trying to move away from coal. We know that Indonesia is making commitments, and therein Pakistan going ahead with these power plants will have to be reassessed. Uh, Although when we say reassessment, that doesn't mean that Pakistan doesn't need electricity. It will definitely need electricity for growth, but where will that electricity come from has to be chosen. As Josephine mentioned, we should look towards solar and wind as the energy sources of future, and they will not only make a climatic sense or a human health perspective sense or ecological sense, but it also makes a complete sense from an economic perspective to not go ahead with a coal-based power plant and instead go for renewable energy sources. This graph shows that the cost of coal is nearly cost of new coal is nearly at the same level as renewable electricity in most of the geographies, even in US and China. And when we say when we in South Asia, there is a tendency to say no to a West model or no to a model which has come from US or Europe, because we all know that our geographies, our economies, and everything is very different. And that's where I would like to cite another example that in India, if you look at last few new renewable energy or solar based auctions, utility scale auctions for energy or electricity generation sources, the cost of new renewable energy standalone without the batteries has come down to less than 2.5 Indian rupees, whereas the cost of new coal in India is about 4.5 to 5 rupees. And that technically means that if we go for solar and wind energy, it will be at least 40 to 50% cheaper than the coal-based electricity. Now, people will say that solar and wind is not available 24 hours a day, and therein, if you look at these graphs, as well as the research suggests that even with storage, the cost of renewable energy is coming down rapidly over last few years, and now in couple of years, it will be very cost competitive with the coal-based electricity. On top of that, a country which has decent water sources in the north and has is seeing this upliftment of renewable energy in the nearby regions and has ample solar insolation as well as wind resources in the country. A simple mixture of all hydro, wind, and solar can give reliable source of power for 24 hours a day. The permutation combinations just have to be worked out, but yes, that's a caveat there is that even that won't be sufficient right now, at least in coming few years, to replace all the existing coal. But it can definitely, if we go for aggressive renewable energy, that can definitely be enough to power the future growth in the demand for electricity, because we know that because of COVID, the electricity demand has been hampered across the globe, even in Pakistan, and it will take a couple of years to go back to the same electricity consumption levels which we projected for maybe 2025. If we were projecting that we will reach X amount of electricity consumption in 2025, now we might see that in 2027 or 26, and that gives us more time to go aggressive for renewable energy. In the end, I'll like to sum up with the key findings that Pakistan is already suffering from air pollution levels that are among the highest in the world, reducing life expectancy in the country by more than 2.5 years. It technically means if we reduce the pollution, we will be able to live maybe 2.5 more years if we are in Pakistan. The Thar coal plants and mines would expose more than a lakh people to accidents of World Health Organization guidelines of 24 hourly SO2, 3,000 people to exceed the guidelines of 24 hourly PM 2.5. And as we mentioned that more than 30,000 or around 30,000 people will die over the next 30 years. The plants will also emit an estimated 1,400 kg of mercury per year, which will be one fifth would be deposited on land ecosystem, and most of this deposition will take place on the cropland, increasing mercury concentration in the crops. And as I mentioned, it through food chain it will enter the human bodies and will result into catastrophic impacts. Few of the recommendations which we had in the report were that stringent emission standard should be deployed and enforced to control PM, SO2, NO2, and mercury pollution emissions, as well as to reduce the usage of water by operational coal-based power plants, similar to other countries as those enforced in EU, China, and right now even India has stringent emission standards for coal-based power plants. It is essential to fully assess and take into consideration the cost of air pollution and other external impacts when making decisions about future power generation, because first of all, coal is not the cheapest source of energy right now, and even if few people say that what we should emphasize on the external cost associated with coal, which comes in form of water stress, in form of air pollution, health impacts, and even crop productivity loss. So all those should be included, and future growth in electricity demand should be met by renewable energy. The planned addition of large amount coal capacity would worsen Pakistan's already hazardous air quality while adding to the in-depthness of the power sector. This is an interesting point. We have seen that over last 5 years, India is struggling very hard with an investment which it made over last 10 years into the coal power sector, and because of this rapid boom in the installation of coal-based power plants and many still in pipeline, it led to a power surplus situation in India. And right now, even Pakistan is facing these problems. And the worst thing about power surplus situation is that these resources, new coal-based power plants which we are constructing, we will not be using that. And even if we use those, we'll be using those at a very low power load factor, which technically means that the marginal cost of power production from these power plants will be very high, and it will also lead to already existing power plants or energy sources being run at lower power load factor, again increasing the cost for even other power plants. So therein, the debt which will be on Pakistan will keep rising because of these upcoming power plants. Because these power plants will not be used to the full capacity, they will be stranded, and they will not be able to recover the cost which they have been built on, and that will put Pakistan in a cycle of just paying parts of rebate and not the principal. And therein the investment in coal is a really bad idea for a country which has power surplus situation right now. So that's another recommendation, that we should look at our future coal-based expansion capacity and rationalize that to reduce any stranded assets or any assets which will not be required in future, and do away with those kind of investments, and rather they invest money into the renewable energy and grid modernization, so that the future generation can have a healthy environment, healthy lives, and contribute significantly to the economic development of the region. That's all from my side. I'll stop sharing the screen, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer that or discuss that with you guys.
Many congratulations to you, Sunil, and for the whole of the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. I think that you made it clear that this is a complex issue with a tremendous variety of impacts. Perhaps the most important of them all is on the health of people that has not been spoken about. People think about the degrees of temperature. It's not degrees of temperature. It's a much more important and complex and day-to-day issue. We fully endorse your plight. We think that economically it's obvious that solar and wind energy are there and are competitive. This makes no sense. This is a tremendous catastrophe for the whole of the environment and for the whole health of the people. It is really incomprehensible that the international agreed framework allows this sort of international investment on in such a scale like the one of coal-based power plants. And hopefully, people will start reasoning on the basis of these facts, and the whole campaign to shut down all the coal-based power plants in South Asia will be full steam as soon as possible. Thank you so much. And now we will have our last intervenant. He is coming from another side of the subcontinent, from the top, from the northeastern side of the subcontinent. He is going to address us another angle of the issues that are at stake with the water management and energy in South Asia. He we have known for quite some time. He is a brilliant speaker. He has a tremendous knowledge of the region, and we are very thankful that you took your time to share this knowledge of yours with us. Please, the floor is yours, Mr. Sering.
Good morning from the United States. Good afternoon, everyone there. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Paulo. It's always a pleasure and honor to be on your show. Thank you, Josephine and Sunil, for deep insight into what is going on in Pakistan's energy situation. You guys talked about the mining and coal. This is, I think, something very important, as Paulo said. Health-wise. These projects impact the local people, and the revenue and the income that goes back to the people is not that much to call these projects cost effective. Especially in the long run, we will be having a tremendous problem in health sector as far as the local people are concerned, especially the people who are living in the proximity of those areas where the mining is being done or the coal's being extracted. Now, Josephine mentioned about CPAC, so I'm not going to go into details about CPAC. Thank you so much for making my work a little lighter. What I will do is I will focus on the health issue, I will focus on the environment, but then I will also try to weave that with how it impacts the local land rights and local, interest of the local people. So I don't know if you've seen a map of Pakistan, but the rivers that come from Tibet into Indian Ladakh and then into Pakistani Ladakh, which Gilgit-Baltistan is part of. It's in Pakistani occupation right now, but it's part of the Ladakh Union Territory. And then it goes towards Pakistan. Gilgit-Baltistan borders Xinjiang, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Indian Ladakh, and then in the south, the Pakistani occupied parts of Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistani province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So this is how the map looks like. The Indus River that comes from the Indian Ladakh and the Shyok River, most of the water that comes from that side, eventually augmented by the rivers from Gilgit, Astor, and other parts of Baltistan. And then it enters into Pakistani province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and that is where most of the dam building will be happening in Gilgit-Baltistan or on the border of Gilgit-Baltistan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The other part of Jammu and Kashmir, which is in Pakistani occupation, the local authorities call it Azad Kashmir, AJK. And AJK, there's a lot of dam building going on under CPAC right now. 5 major dams that will be built there. So in Gilgit-Baltistan, we start with, let's say, the biggest dam that Pakistan and China will be building under CPAC is called Diamir Dam. It's about 4,500 megawatts of energy that we are expecting to extract from it. It is going to be the tallest concrete built dam in the world. It is going to be a huge water reservoir. And the reason why they're trying to build a huge reservoir, which will extend for over 100 kilometers, it will submerge and inundate most of the fertile parts of Gilgit-Baltistan. And the reason why they're building this huge reservoir because they want that water um, for needs for the lower riparian region. So if you look at Pakistan's map, the dam map, you will see that there's another large dam built on Indus, which is called Tarbela Dam. A lot of silt is getting um, transported through Indus, through Shyok, through Shigar, and other rivers, and Gilgit rivers, and these water bodies are contributing to silt deposit in Tarbela Dam. That means that the life of Tarbela Dam is getting shortened by the muddy water, the water with silt that is coming from upstream, from China, from Tibet, from India, and Gilgit-Baltistan. So what they're trying to do is trying to build this huge reservoir in Gilgit-Baltistan called the Amir Basha Dam that will be able to control the silt and give a little bit extra life to the Tarbela Dam, about another 50 to 20 years, let's say. And this will also be useful for Pakistan because if they were to build another dam further downstream on Indus called Kalabag Dam, they're still in a conversation stage right now because some of the provinces, like the Sindh province, for instance, or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, are not happy with more dams built on Indus. So they're in a conversation stage right now. But let's say if the provinces were to agree and build dams, then the dams built in Gilgit-Baltistan will contribute a longer life for Kalabag Dam as well. So I think Pakistan is looking at not only um, storage of water for agriculture purposes, but it is also looking at to prolong the life of its existing dams in the future, planned dams that were to come on, if agreed by all stakeholders, will come on in this. Um, Now we will go back to as we were talking about, what would the dams be doing to the local people as well as Pakistan. So as I said, that these rivers that come from Gilgit-Baltistan, as well as the rivers that come from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, they're all glacial fed rivers. That means the health of the glaciers, the health of the mountains is extremely important for these waters to continue to trickle down and form, uh, you know, uh, larger water bodies for Pakistani provinces like Punjab and Sindh to benefit. Their agriculture depends on these rivers. So what would happen is that when you build huge dams in Gilgit-Baltistan, now Gilgit-Baltistan is called a desert. I mean, it is supposed to be cold. It is a desert because it is barren. More than 96% of the land of Gilgit-Baltistan is barren, with some parts having sand dunes, other parts, just like huge, vast, barren, flatlands and mountains. But at the same time, it is supposed to stay dry. It should not be too much humid. So the increase in humidity means that it will increase the melting of the glaciers. It will increase the temperature in the region and will increase the melting of the glaciers, which is not good. So you build more dams, it will lead to more evaporation of water within Gilgit-Baltistan. It will lead more, increase in humidity. It will increase to faster melting of the glaciers. I think it's a very, simple cycle. It's a vicious cycle, I would say, because while Pakistan is thinking that building dams will increase energy resources for its people in provinces like Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the truth is that the melting of the glaciers will bring more avalanches, will bring more landslides, will reduce in the amount of water on the mountains that feed into these big dams. So the water amount in the dams will decrease, whereas the silt amount in the dams will also increase exponentially because of the avalanches and the landslides that will be coming. So I think that is something that Pakistan should be looking at, because when you construct dams, the short-term benefit of a dam is that you get a lot of electricity. It gets pumped into your system, your collective pool of energy, and it gives a lot of energy to your industry downstream in Punjab, for instance, in Karachi and other places. But after a few years, then you will start seeing the downturn, and the consequences and the side effects of the dam, which are long term, because dams are built to stay for like 50, 80, 100, 200 years. These are huge concrete dams they're building, right? So we are looking at some huge problems in Gilgit Baltistan, um, that I think Pakistani government is not really aware of, or they're not really concerned, because the governments last for like 4 to 5 years, and that's the time period that they're always trying to focus on. I mean, there was one Pakistani minister, I think, in another program that Paulo arranged. I talked about that minister. He was suggesting that the glaciers in Gilgit Baltistan should be bombed, so there's more release of water in the rivers. Yes, this is true. And he said it in the parliament that the glacier should be bombed so there's more release of water in the rivers, so people in Sindh and Punjab could benefit better. These are the craziness, the short-term thinking of a politician, because they are ruling for like 4 to 5 years. They're not sure if they're going to come back into power. So uh, that is something that the local people have to live with for like 50, 100, 200 years, of the consequences of the policies that are made somewhere else. Now, if I tell you, and Paulo knows it really well, that Gilgit Baltistan is not a part of Pakistan, that means Pakistani political system does not really apply in Gilgit Baltistan. Pakistan's constitution doesn't apply in Gilgit Baltistan. So there's no constitutional body in Gilgit Baltistan to take the local people and the environment. If when you build dams, for instance, let's talk about the Neelam Jhelum hydropower dam, or the Karod dam, or the other dams that are being built on Jhelum River, on Kishan Ganga River in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. These dams, they're being built by China to produce electricity anywhere between 3,000 to 3,500 megawatts, up to almost 5,000 megawatts, when all these five dam structures will be completed. They will dry they will dry up all the water in the Kishan Ganga River, that especially downstream, part of the river south of Muzaffarabad, for instance. It will completely dry up the river, and the water table that will go down will have impact on the local people. They're already complaining about health issues like hepatitis, for instance, and other issues. These dams will have a huge impact on the wildlife. When you block a river to construct a dam, it will have a huge impact on the local wildlife. Now, those people who understand science, like Josephine and Celine and Paolo, they know that we live in an ecosystem where human and animal life, and the lives of the plants, this the whole ecosystem, we are weaved together, and and the health of one depends on the health of the other. Politicians don't look at like that. They don't see the importance of the health of an animal, the wildlife, the flora and fauna. They only look at how it is going to impact them, make more money, or generate electricity for their own constituencies. Now, Gilgit Baltistan, or Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is not part of Pakistan, and Pakistan's constitution doesn't apply there, that means these people do not have representation in Pakistani parliament. What does it mean? It means that these people will not be able to make the decisions for themselves. So somebody else from Pakistani city of, let's say, I don't know, Karachi or Lahore will be making decisions for them, which is very alarming, because they would not understand how the local ecosystem works. right? So it is very important to look at the ecosystem and how, the safeguarding the health of the humans as well as the wildlife, flora and fauna is extremely important to create a balance of ecosystem, which is absent right now because the Pakistani policies are being made primarily to benefit people living in Punjab. It is only about human needs downstream in the lower riparian part of Punjab. Now, another problem that we will see, and you mentioned a coal industry in Sindh province. So what happens is that Sindh is a local riparian on the Indus River. When you block the water up in Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit Baltistan, the water doesn't reach Sindh. That means the delta of the Sindh is impacted. The salts are pushing in because there's not enough pressure from the river water along the delta. It will destroy the agricultural land for the people living in District Badin, District Thatta, District Sajawal, District Karachi, Malir, and all other people who live right on the banks of the on the banks of the Indus, where it meets the delta of the Arabian Sea of the Indian Ocean. So I think the health aspect of not having enough sweet water and that getting replaced by brackish water or salt water will be immense. Now, Gilgit Baltistan has a smaller population, let's say a million and a half. But Sindh has a population of almost 40 to 45 million. And those people, a huge number of those people, for instance, about 20 million of those people, they live in Karachi alone. About 25 million people live on the Indus Delta. And I think that is something that we have to look at the health of the local people, health of the ecosystem, the flora and fauna, and the mangrove forest that maintain the health of the delta there um, will be impacted immensely. Now, Paula, do we have time or do I have to stop?
No, no, please, please, take your time. I mean, we did not
Okay.
set a
I don't
deadline,
want you
so
guys to fall
yeah,
asleep.
you don't run this risk.
Demographic changes are something that are linked to survival of human. When you live in an area for hundreds and thousands of years, you call it your home. There's an emotional attachment to your land. There's natural attachment to that land. You have cultural identity that is associated with that land. But on top of that, your economic well-being, your survival, your health, and everything is associated with that. When you build a dam, people are uprooted, they're displaced. Then they have to move to new places. It's not really easy for them to adjust to the new places. It impacts their health, impact the education and well-being of their children. So unfortunately, the dams that are being built in Gilgit-Baltistan are built very close to the southern end of Gilgit-Baltistan, which is a double cropping zone. The district Diamir, which is where the dam is being built, is a double cropping zone. So what happens is that a lot of people will be displaced from they will lose their jobs related to the agriculture field. They will be uprooted. They will be looking for new means of livelihood. They will be displaced. There's a sense of insecurity that will prevail with it, right? And that is something that impacts your physical health. When you feel insecure about your economic well being, it impacts your psychological health, it impacts your emotional health. So, that is something really important that, a lot of scientists don't talk about when they're talking about human health. They always talk about how it is going to impact their lungs, how it is going to impact their gut, how it is going to impact their, for instance, heart, and all that. But it also gravely impacts their psychological well-being. But because now they're homeless, now they're completely cut off from their roots and their identity and their ancestral homes where their parents and grandparents and great grandparents made their life in a made it home. So I think the emotional and psychological well-being is extremely important for people to maintain their physical health. So I think that is something that is, most of the time missing in conversation when I hear people talking about health issues. Pakistan is building all these dams, and they're doing is, when you build dams, you crush rocks, right? So they have these huge rock crushing plants all over the area. And when these rocks are crushed, it creates a lot of pollution that impacts your lungs, coming back to the physical health now. So the children and the grown-ups and elderly will be affected in the long run, as dams take about 15 to 20 years to be completed. So all that time, when the rivers are being polluted while dams are being built, all that chemicals that will be used in construction, all that um, the mixtures that will be used in construction, a lot of that residue, a lot of that leftover material will be dumped into the river. I think that is something that we should be concerned about. As I said, they do not have any local management bodies because of the lack of constitutional rights. And in the absence of management bodies, you cannot really work on how to deal with the aftermath of construction. Where does all the trash go, right? Where does all the pollutants go? There's no proper system. Everything will end up in the rivers, and then eventually it will impact the local people. Um, then we are talking about, you know, um, for instance, the damage over the prolonged time. So we're talking about at least 5 to 6 or 10 generations here. The damage over prolonged time. That is, I think, we need to think about. We need to think about the damage to the local people that will come for over the next 50 to 100 years. It will force people to move out of the area. It will bring huge demographic changes. And I think that is something that will change local identity and the rights over natural land and resources that we are talking about. What is the solution? I think Sunil mentioned very nicely. Gilgit-Baltistan, as I said, it's a barren land. It's a cold desert. There's plenty of, we live in valleys, and so it is really easy to channel the wind in valleys. So there's plenty of wind and solar energy in Gilgit-Baltistan. We live at about anywhere between 5,000 to 8 or 9,000 feet from sea level. There's plenty of solar energy that could be used in Gilgit-Baltistan. Um, and we should also look towards smaller hydropower units. I used to work for an organization that used to build smaller hydro units. That is good for the local people. But right now, the problem is that Pakistan is looking at the well-being of people in Punjab. They're using the land of Gilgit-Baltistan to build a dam or build several dams in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan to take care of the energy needs and agriculture in Punjab. Punjab is almost 55% of Pakistan's population. That's about 115 million people who live in Punjab. And that's where all the water is going to go. That's where all the energy is going to go. The other problem is that China is fast changing the demography in Xinjiang. China is bringing a lot of people in Xinjiang because the people of Xinjiang do not want to live with China. So the solution to counter the aspirations of the local people, the political aspirations, is to convert them into a minority. And that's what China is doing, bringing a lot of Hans into Urumqi, into Kashgar, into Khotan, into Aksu and other areas. And they need energy. They need a lot of energy. So these dams, because Gilgit is right on the border of Xinjiang, these dams built in Gilgit will also pump energy into Xinjiang. So it seems like while the local people's health and well-being will be compromised, the energy will bypass them. The benefits of the construction of these dams will bypass them, and that will go to the people of Xinjiang, people in Punjab mostly, and local people will be left with uh, you know the consequences for much for the longer term consequences. I will probably stop here. I mean, there's a lot more to talk, but thank you so much, Paula, for once again giving me an opportunity. It's always a good, chance to say hello to you. So I'm very happy you're well and back in the saddle, and hope to continue with this collaboration in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senga. We did have another view on the issue that we have to consider very carefully from the whole of the ecosystem point of view, what dams can make,
Yeah.
that they are not a miracle solution, and that instead of them, as Sunil said before, renewables sources like sun and wind should be the high priority. I confess it was a novelty to me to know that there was a minister in Pakistan that proposed to bomb the glaciers of Himalayas, but after seeing the Prime
Yes.
Minister Imran Khan glorifying Bin Laden and all the state promoted lunacy of the blasphemia murders that people, murderers of innocent people that have not even been tried, have been hailed as heroes. This is really very, very concerning. The worst is really when there is no rationality, and when we see these sort of actions, we see no rationality whatsoever, and that's really the most dangerous
Yeah.
and the most concerning fact. But we had three different views. I think that we covered very well the subject. I would like to say thank you very much to our three panelists. I would like to say to you that we want to continue to sponsor the issue to the limelight, the issue of energy, of pollution, is not only global warming, is a much more complex one, is a much more pressing one, and the existing legal framework is not answering to the problems we are facing. So thank you all very much. We will certainly continue this battle, and hopefully we will see all of you soon in our next webinar that will most likely take place still in September. Thank you all, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Paulo. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, sharing. It was really interesting to hear.
Thank you so
Thank
Thank
much.
you.
you.
Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, Senga.
Bye.